Yes.
Basically, all I know about what's going on locally, I read in the Monitor. And the story of what happened to the proposed project in East Concord, because the solar panels were determined to be too much blockage of...
Impervious.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
That was frustrating to me as a citizen. Mr. Werner, being chair of the Energy Committee of the City Council, can you give us your thoughts on that specific project?
I can. So actually there's an opportunity coming up soon, actually on the 20th of February before the Planning Board. Our committee has been working with the Planning Department and other city departments to fashion a new ordinance. Because right now, solar is not addressed at all in our zoning. So I think one of the effects of making the commitment that we did last summer was a renewed ability to focus the mind on how is it that we're going to put in place policies to get along to this goal that we set. And zoning is certainly one of them, because we want to be welcoming to solar. At the same time, I think there is legitimate interest on the other side as to where would you want it to be in the city, and are there appropriate areas where perhaps you don't necessarily want development, and that is the tension. I personally think that the definition of a solar panel being an impervious surface is wrong. But as you'll see with this ordinance, as it comes into the public process and people have the ability to comment, first at planning and then the city council probably in April. We urge you to come and pay attention to what's going on there and make your own comments, because we're trying to strike a balance, and admittedly it's not easy in terms of, do people want, what size of solar development do you want in the rural open areas of the city? Some people are fine with that, other people are very concerned about that. And we have a limited amount of space on our municipal properties to be able to develop these sources within the city. But to answer your question directly, I have an objection to that definition. We're trying to get to a point where we have more flexibility and are able to attract those kinds of projects into the city. But it's in process. Oh, sure. Sorry.
So we're a state that gets most of our income from tourism. We're mostly forested. We care a lot about our scenic qualities and our landscape. And so some people have concerns about solar and wind development, right? Because it's considered development. And I guess what I'm always wondering about, so we already have all these developed spaces. We have municipalities, we have malls, we have shopping plazas, we have parking lots. So what's the reason that we can't develop, or we're not seeing, or at least I'm not seeing or not aware of, solar projects being proposed in places that are already developed, rooftops, things like that, where you're not converting land, essentially? What's up with that?
So we are, I mentioned 8,000 completed installs to date, about half of them in New Hampshire. As a state, we've seen about 12,000 total installs. Our friends in Mass are over 300,000, so we got a long way to go. But those are primarily rooftops. And we totally agree, the low-hanging fruit is fill those existing built surfaces. Carports, you can shade your cars at the same time. We've done a few in New Hampshire. There's a bit of a higher upfront cost because you're building the steel frame for the panels. You don't have an existing roof. But we do a lot of commercial rooftops. Big flat rubber membrane roof is perfect. Install is pretty quick, pretty cheap. It'll pay itself off usually in 5 years, 6 years, with not great incentives. If that's in Mass, it'll be 2 or 3 years. So that's where we do focus most of our time. I would argue that longer term, we're going to need to change our definition a little bit of what is acceptable to look at. We're going to need some more ridge lines with wind in this state, in my opinion. as they're, I think, finally gonna do in Antrim. I grew up in the Monadnock area. I can't wait to see solar on that ridge over Lake Willard where I used to swim. So we're gonna have to get used to that if we're gonna get anywhere close to 100%, but we can get a long way. We can get far beyond where we are today by filling up the existing roofs and parking lots.
The thing I would add is that other states have taken advantage of rooftops far more than, like, super creative. New Jersey, hello, #1 in solar. They've got like these crazy numbers of applications, and it's high density up top. And San Francisco, same thing. You don't, the idea of having solar fields isn't applicable there. And so you see it all over the place. I think it's being a little bit more challenged, that they tend to be a little bit more creative and finding more of those spots. So.
And it does go back to advocacy. As some of you probably know, the new building codes in California, virtually every new home will have to have solar. Just like every home has faucets and toilets, they'll have solar on the roof. And if I'm happiest when I get to work with architects at the beginning of a project, because if we can tilt that roof just a little bit, change the pitch just a little bit, get the azimuth right, you can get tremendous solar power from your existing structure that you can spend the same amount of money building. So yes, that's how we need to be thinking.
Is there any way that we get it at the high schools and at the different schools with the solar panels on top of that?
We've done a bunch of schools and always eager to do more. There's an extra bit of complexity, which I won't get into right now, but happy to talk to anyone but a nonprofit. In their wisdom, our federal government delivers most of the existing incentives for solar through the tax code. So if you pay a big tax bill, great, you can reduce that tax bill. If you're a nonprofit entity that doesn't pay a tax bill, you can't. The solution to that we and others have worked on is to bring impact investors into the game. These are local people in the community who have a big tax bill of their own and who want to see more solar deployed. And through what's called a power purchase agreement, a PPA, they're the ones who are paying for and owning the panels on that school roof for at least 5 years. And they're selling the power from the array to the school while they're taking advantage of the tax credits and passing the savings on. And then after 5 years, which is the time the IRS requires them to own the asset, in order to realize those incentives, they can sell it at a discount to the school. And then for the next 30 plus years, the school can generate its own power for free from the sun. And that's what we've done with a lot of communities so far, and we're excited that many more are looking at it too.
The answer to your question is yes. As a matter of fact, there are solar companies, and Revision is one, but I think would basically do an audit or tell a customer, this is what's possible, this is what can be built, this is what your roof will sustain, this is what it might cost, this is your payback. I certainly urged the school district here in Concord to take a look at that. We did have a very good meeting with them a few weeks ago, and there's significant interest in electric buses, so that's very good. But it's I think helpful for community members to communicate with school board members, my colleagues on the city council, superintendent, school administration, to really urge them to take a look at that. My hope, frankly, is that the school district would take some of the same action and commitment around renewable energy goals that the city council has. As you know, in Concord, we're separately governed.
Right.
But we want to collaborate with them, and we're really trying to do more of it. So.
One of the programs, there are a lot of different programs, but one that I get really excited about is getting electric buses that plug into your solar panels. So then you go to school running on sunshine, and expanding that. And how exciting is that to like go to school and be like, yeah, that's how I got here, you know? And there are more outlets, more different a variety of different tools to get the school engaged in that. And, you know, I know the energy plan that Rob is developing with the city council is more about the city council. But if you guys showed up to those meetings and said, hey, what about the school? It opens people's eyes and it opens people's ears to start being creative. Because that's the toughest part, right? Is figuring out, how does this work for us? And if you're there asking, well, can it work for us too at the school? Why not?
And you guys can lead the way.
Back there in the back.
Dan, would you mind talking a little bit more about the purchasing power agreement? I mean, that is kind of community-based as well, right? I mean, it's an investor that ultimately can, would you mind?
Yeah, thank you. So these PPAs that you hear, power purchase agreements, the genesis was actually, you saw the National Renewable Energy Labs. This isn't an end run around the tax code. This is actually developed by the federal government as a solution for tax-exempt entities, schools, nonprofits, cities, to access renewable energy and to indirectly unlock those incentives without the big capital cost. In brief, again, we pair the off-taker, the host organization, whether it's a school, city, library, what have you, with local impact investors. And we've been blessed to have a number of people in New Hampshire, as well as in Maine where we work, who really want to see more solar deployed. Perhaps some of you, if you happen to have a big tax bill and want to help put your money to work for solar, we can provide the investors the benefit of reducing their tax liability, provided they engage and meet the IRS requirements for co-managing, co-owning the asset with Revision Energy. They put their tax liability to work. We bring in debt partners, such as the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, just down the street here. That was our leading debt partner in projects in 2018. And together we bring the capital required to build the projects for your local high school. And the school, because the school isn't owning the array, the panels, the inverters, the equipment, they're not paying anything up front. They're simply agreeing through this power purchase agreement to buy the power from the array at a predetermined rate below current utility rates. So they start saving modestly from day one by buying cheaper power off their roof. And then after the 5-year period, which, as I noted, is what the IRS requires the investor to hold, that's the term they need to own the asset, otherwise they have to give back the incentives. So it's not a gaming of the system. But after 5 years, the impact investors offer the opportunity, and it's an option, not a requirement, but they can choose, the school can choose any year beginning in year 6 all the way through a standard 25-year term. Any year they can buy it out at fair market value, which is reduced by those tax incentives. Most of the organizations, we've built over 110 of these PPAs for larger institutions. So far, they're all exercising that buyout option once they reach year 6 so that they can maximize their savings. And that frees us and our investors up. That brings the capital back to recycle and invest in more projects like this. And happy to stick around and chat more, leave some materials if you'd like to learn.
But does that helps you to get beyond like some of the ordinances and stuff like that restricts you from doing that, right?
So we still go through a zoning process. It happens that most of our PPAs are on rooftops, and we've never been barred from installing on a rooftop, unless when we go through the structural review, it isn't obviously sound enough. But from a zoning standpoint, we've never had issues with rooftops, except in a few very rare historic districts.
Yeah, normally.
Sometimes we need to.
Yeah, normally zoning for residential rooftop and rooftop for both residential and commercial, as far as zoning, it's usually by right.
Yeah.
So can you do a combination between private and municipal?
Yes, is the short answer. We do PPAs for all manner of clients. And again, happy to stick around and chat more if you have other questions.
What is Concord doing to support residential development? We have a lot of, I think, good examples like Plymouth Area Renewable Energy Initiative. We got Upper Valley who does the same kind of model, really educating local homeowners about the benefits, the current economic state, and how it's pretty much a no-brainer. And then working with providers, installers, and getting discounts and doing getting volunteers involved to help with installations. Concord should be doing some of that. I'm not a Concord resident, so I don't know, but are you doing any of that?
Well, we do have a tax exemption in terms of property tax exemption, which many communities have around New Hampshire. It's kind of a patchwork in terms of what communities have and what don't. And I believe there's legislation at the state level to have that to be a statewide aspect to that. So we do have that. One of the things that we're looking at with our zoning, which I think is important, is to try to incentivize community solar projects within the city of Concord. So I think the signal that is sent in terms of your zoning, not only what it says on paper, but the perception in terms of, is the city welcoming to solar, will mean a lot. And there's a lot of work we need to do to publicize that. But that's some of the sort of things that we're involved with right now.
And I think you're referring to the solarized campaigns, which we've seen in a lot of other communities. We worked with 15 Seacoast communities last year, for instance, and other great companies have done these as well. Basically, it's a bulk discount, bulk buying program, and we would encourage Concord and every other community to do the same.
Other questions? Yeah.
Over the last few weeks, we've seen a lot of foreign renewable energy companies fail to meet their profit estimates and thus going bankrupt. How does an American company like Provision avoid suffering the same fate?
We call it the solar coaster. There's a lot of ups and downs. Some of you might have read in the Union Leader this week about the loss of about 15% of New Hampshire's solar industry jobs. We're down from a high of 1,100. That is thanks in large part to the President's tariff last year on solar panels, a 30% tariff on imported solar. The ostensible desire to add more solar manufacturing jobs, when in fact quality, low-priced imported panels support 250,000 jobs in the solar industry in this country instead of 1,000 jobs in solar manufacturing in this country. So that was a very wrong-headed decision over which unfortunately we didn't have control. But elections matter, and I trust everybody will be voting in the primary and in the presidential election and in every other election to ensure that we elect leaders who accept the science and who want to put New Hampshire, put the U.S. at the forefront of this transition. In New Hampshire, we're trying to run a business well, and I could chat more after about specific steps that we're taking. But we do see tremendous demand. The biggest barrier we have to growth is a workforce one, where we need more young folks or older folks willing and interested to work in the trades, to come on as electrical apprentices, for instance, and over 4 years become a certified electrician, make a great wage installing these systems, wiring these systems. A step we recently took as a company is to launch an in-house school, Revision Energy Technical Center, to train young apprentices. So we're looking for high school grads, college grads, as well as older people who want to be part of this transition. New Hampshire is very low unemployment, so it's a challenge. But certainly the demand is there, and as I said before, the resources there are just falling on us every day. So with some better policy and some good election results, I think we'll see a lot of growth in the future.
I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we'll be around after. Go ahead.
A very quick question, maybe for Ken. What's the state of battery storage in your system zone, and what is the distribution